Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Mark Snowden, and I'm the Chief of Psychiatry here at Harborview and the Vice Chair for Clinical Services for the department, and have the distinct privilege of welcoming you all to our annual Ripley Memorial Lecture. I've been here at Harborview now in my 23rd year, and as I was telling Howard, did my training here all the way from medical school, and I think we've had a quite distinguished Ripley Memorial Lecture series. For folks who don't know, Dr. Ripley was the first chairman of our department. He was quite dedicated in his work to teaching, service, and research. This lectureship was endowed in his name, and as I mentioned, we've been doing it every year since then. With that, I will go ahead and start the introduction for our speaker today. Dr. Howard Liu did his medical training and residency at the University of Michigan. He then went on to a child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Massachusetts General McLean. He's currently the interim chair and associate professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. He's a nationally recognized educator and behavioral health workforce expert and a practicing child psychiatrist at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. He's the director of the Behavioral Health Education Center of Nebraska, which is a state-funded office whose mission is to recruit and retain a skilled and passionate behavioral health workforce. He serves as a founding member of the Medical Directors Institute for the National Council of Behavioral Health, and had a nice conversation with him about the fact that he's also a member of the National Advisory Council for the Robert Johnson Clinical Scholars Program, which a couple of faculty here have been a part of. The Behavioral Health Education Network Center has been selected to receive the National Council for Behavioral Health Champions of Training and Workforce Development Award. He's here today to talk to us about a topic that I confess I know little about because I don't tweet, but I'm here to learn, which is tweeting your way to the top, leveraging social media to elevate your department or your career. So join me in welcoming Dr. Liu.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much to Dr. Stone, a very kind introduction. This will be, I would say, probably a different kind of talk for the Ripley series than you probably had in the past. And I did hear about your former chairman, also from Dr. Chris Varley, who I had the pleasure of knowing for the last decade, and really had a very nice and very hospitable dinner with my former medical student here, Dr. Michelle Wiese, and several others from the Ames Center. And so really, it's great to be here. So what we're going to talk about today is a bit interactive. I know that some of you are probably seeing this or listening to this through Zoom as well. And so later on, we'll have a spot for questions and comments. We'll try to save about 10 to 15 minutes for that. So please, as you have those questions, just jot them down. Unlike most talks, I'm going to encourage you to have your phone out. And if you're not on Twitter, to get on and just set up an account, and then we'll be happy to advise you and chat with you about how to move it forward. So today we're talking about really how do you leverage social media as a rising platform to elevate science, to elevate clinical work, to do patient engagement at the highest level. So Snowden is a alumnus of this clinical scholars program, and really part of the as it's reformed around the National Advisory Committee, it's really thinking about how do we engage with communities directly, and how do we make sure that we take on so-called wicked problems in health that are difficult, complex, and really require multi-system interventions. And I think social media is really one of those tools to think about. And if you're not currently using it professionally, it could be an avenue for the future. So if you are on Twitter or thinking about it, here's some handles to be aware of. I'll kind of refer to them a little bit later as well. So I would like to thank your chair, Dr. Unitzer, for the invitation. And we actually met each other at the Psychiatry Chairs Conference a little bit earlier this year. We gave a presentation to all the chairs along with my colleagues, Dr. Meg Chisholm, who's at Hopkins and also is a well-known social media and an educational rock star over there. Ann Tenyer, who's one of the managing the Twitter feed for academic psychiatry. And then at my own shop, Laura Flores, who's an MD PhD candidate, who has really helped me to design one of the handouts there on anatomy of a retweet, and it's quite a active user in her own right. So, so in case you didn't know, as of December, your department does have an account. And so let me just ask, how many of you currently have a Twitter account? Raise your hand. All right, well, it's, probably about 10 of you. And we can't see the hands that are on Zoom, but I imagine some of you do as well. Look, well, there we go. So, it's a couple of, so I would say maybe 10 to 12 folks are on Twitter. And let me ask you again, for those that are on Twitter, how many of you are using it primarily professionally versus personally? Raise your hands. All right, so I think most of you, that's great. So those folks, and as you look around that room, virtually or here, will be your mentors in the future because they're already on. And my job today will be kind of to give you some thoughts, some principles, some ways that's commonly used, and then to think about how we can collaborate in the future. So that would be my hope. So Becky, who's your communications lead here, is the person that mans your account, and she's very, very much interested to work with your chair and all of you to see how you can amplify the message of the good works that you guys are doing across all the mission areas. So we just met just before this grand rounds. I have no conflicts related to social media, and nobody pays me to do it. So today, kind of three things. I think most folks here know a lot about different platforms of social media, but we'll just kind of talk about why Twitter, because I know it's a little bit older platform for those who are very much on Instagram and Snapchat. Talk about maybe a likely case scenario you might encounter on Twitter and how we think through that. And then just think about, again, the next steps. Really, let's be action-oriented today and think about how can we do something tangible for the future. So we'll start off, and I had a great tour from Dr. Chris Farley, your faculty here, yesterday at the Seattle Children's Hospital, and he was my tour guide. And this is really the places that we'll visit today. We'll do a couple exercises, and then go through principles and then what the next steps are. The first one is that in case you are in a row by yourself, try to turn around or talk to a friend or a colleague, introduce yourself. But the exercise I'd like you to do is imagine that you're going to start a new media channel. It could be a news channel, it could be health related, it could be psychiatry, psychology, could be lifestyle. And if you were to boil it down and make a pitch to the studio executive about what this channel would be about, what 3 words would you choose to define your brand? So why don't you think about that and turn and talk to one of your neighbors and take a couple minutes. So go ahead. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back just so our folks who are participating by Zoom can also hear. But does anyone want to share your 3 words for your future media channel? Does anyone have any thoughts? 3 words. Yes, in the back. That's okay. I'll repeat your words. So go ahead. Yes.
My highly successful article is neuroplasticity and clinical practice.
Uh-huh.
And I am the founder of an international effort to improve brain power at any age. That was easy. I just said at any age.
Okay. That's great. So at any age would be your pieces. And then as we'll discuss in a moment, maybe in Twitter language, you would hashtag neuroplasticity, hashtag aging, hashtag resilience or potential or something like that. So I think that's great. Any other thoughts about 3 words that you would use for your channel? So you're thinking about the future. So yes, over here. Uh-huh.
Advocacy and relationships.
All right, so if you're on Zoom, the 3 words were addiction, advocacy, and relationships. That's great. And we'll discuss hashtags in a moment, but those are powerful pieces on Twitter. Are you already on Twitter? Yes. And what was your name again?
Garrett.
Garrett. All right, that's great. All right, so this is an exercise that's not just for our own sake here, but if you are to venture onto social media on a professional basis, you don't want to have 16 foci, really. You really want to focus and have consistent themes as if you were a media channel. And so, as you're thinking about your own profile, just keep these in mind, because I know you're doing a lot of great work. So, what is your own view of Twitter? And how many of you guys have seen the Harry Potter movies or read the books? So there's a magic mirror in, I think, the 2nd book. And the mirror shows something different, depending on who looks at it. It basically shows the most passionate desire of your heart, no matter who sees it. So, of course, Harry sees something different than Ron. And, so what is it for us as we look into this? And it's a bit of a Rorschach, for us, is to look into social media. So we'll talk about different perspectives. So, and these are just clips from this week. But one is that Twitter is dangerous and social media is dangerous. And why? Because if you put something out there, whether it's this week, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, when one of you runs for governor of Washington State, they'll look back through your archives and find something, right? And if it's not good, they're going to fire you. So, that's one concern. And I do hear that. And frankly, when I spoke to a lot of the chairs at the chairs conference at AAP, that was a concern, right? About safety. Well, we can't control the message. And so that's one concern. So, here is one of your seminal tweets from your department, from probably someone you guys know, but is it also a way, an avenue for direct public health access, where we can engage with consumers, with families, with legislators, with advocates, all at once, and share a message. In case you're not on Twitter, this little bit.ly thing is just a short link, so it takes up less space because there's a character limit on Twitter. It's been expanded to 280 characters, but still you can't put in a whole book in there. And so it's just a way to save space. But this is one of your quite skilled early tweets from Becky, I believe. And we hope to see more. So the third thing I hear, from both trainees and faculty and administrators and communications directors is that I just don't have the time. So I exercise, or I'm doing work-life integration in 1,000 ways. I've got to write papers. Who's going to pay me to use Twitter? And the answer, by the way, is nobody. Nobody's going to pay you to use Twitter. But, and so what is the return on investment? And it's a question that we have to ask for every activity, especially as wellness and burnout, the literature continues to evolve. But we know it's pretty high. The burnout is a big concern. So why would you waste precious moments weekly, even daily, on social media? So one of the founders of Twitter is Jack Dorsey, and he was one of the initial CEOs. And he says, really, it's a way to spark conversation. So in this room, there's probably 40 or 50 people. And I imagine that were I just to say, talk to me about your most passionate thing, turn to your neighbor, there'd probably be about at least 25 conversations, quite different conversations. And it's good. But then after, lunchtime finishes and we ring the bell, the conversation's over, right? And it stayed in this room. But what if that conversation could spark greater change? What if that very thing that you're most passionate about as a mental health provider, as an administrator, as a researcher, as an educator, could be amplified further? And that really is the value of social media. And what if something that you said or did is something that you're very proud of and you'd like, some others people to know, because maybe it lead to new opportunities, right? So that's really the magic of social media. So now, Twitter is not the leading social media network. And I was chatting about this a little bit at dinner, but Twitter's a little bit older. And it kind of reflects, I think, the cautious nature of academia and the healthcare that we were using a slightly older platform, but we're finally getting there, So, we're not on Instagram, we're not on Snapchat for the most part. And that's okay. But just so you know, this is the average monthly use, around the world of who's on various platforms. And you see Twitter is not the leading element, but again, there's something called academic Twitter, where across higher ed and also including healthcare, a lot of orgs are on there. In your handout, in case you didn't get one, it's next to the sandwiches back there. But it really gives you a sense of who's on there, and that's just a very small snapshot. There's quite a few orgs, and then I didn't list the individuals, but there's a ton of individuals on there that you and I would recognize and potentially collaborate with that are on. And so, some of these platforms, people are on them every day, multiple times a day, right? And probably many of us are on multiple times a day. I would say the trend, as we look across generations to the millennials and Gen Z, is increasingly towards image-based media, right, and video-based media. And so actually, the Snapchat, Instagram, and then YouTube are quite commonly used. Back to more specifically our audience, we're looking at behavioral health organizations. And it's interesting to see, and you have in more detail in the handout the data, but who's kind of really showing up. So the ed orgs in psychiatry are lagging far behind. And I'm pretty active in many of them. So, but they're starting to understand the value of it for recruitment, for amplification of scholarship, for other pieces. And so, ADAMSEP, which is the National Psychiatry Clerkship Directors Group, they have a site. ADPERT, I think, is thinking about it, which is the National Residency Directors Org. And then a couple others are kind of perking up. APA is probably one of our most active, of the professional societies. And they have, a good number of members. But it's dwarfed by NIMH, which curiously has more followers than NIH. And I don't know why, but so you can just see that there's different levels. And really, it's just so you know, it's if you decide to stick your toe in, but no further, you're like the great majority of users, which basically use the media just to read. You never retweet, you never follow others, you just kind of do your thing. And that's just fine. But I would say there's sort of a different cascading levels of engagement. And you kind of go from, first just being curious, right? Just seeing who's on there that you know, and then you get on. And then you start reading things, and then you get passionate by reading some particular article, and you retweet it, which means you forward it on, right? And then after that, you add a comment, which is your particular piece of innovation you're adding to the social media, community. And then you tag that on. And then later on, you are joining chats, which are conversations usually hosted by national organizations around preordained topics, and then you're blogging, and then sooner or later you're, giving talks about Twitter. But so, it's just a slippery slope. But, once you start using it, it becomes increasingly somewhat addictive / engaging. So I'll give you more examples. These are just from this week, and these conversations are happening all around us, right? So, and if you're not on, you're kind of missing the boat. And I don't mean that in a mean way, because we all know about this fear of missing out, which is plaguing a lot of our adolescents and child psychiatrists. But there's conversations swirling around us right now, and definitely when we go to our national conferences, which are some of our professional homes, that you're probably missing out on if you're not on Twitter. But there are also interesting things in other fields, fierce debates and really important discussions that are happening that if you're just following the psych journals, you're going to totally miss. So, for example, something trending just a couple of days ago is a Time magazine article put up by a colleague of mine that I frequently tweet with from WashU. I've never met in person, but she's a surgeon there and a researcher, and she wrote an editorial for Time about missing the window where she could have children, and it inspired hundreds and then thousands of retweets and comments across the academic Twitterverse, and so that is something trending right now, worth reading. But how many of you guys have read the article and know about this? So somebody in the back, did you see it on Twitter? Okay, Facebook, right. So social media. So that's just one example of the 10 million things that are trending right now. I mentioned amplification. I just looked this morning and may have finished my slide set this morning as well. But but at 8:30, I was just looking at what's trending, and this exercise about the 3 words. And so you can see when they list in the last hour, it means it's a more active hashtag. It's a more active word, but there's quite a few things. Some people mention addiction, right? Addiction is trending. Mental health is trending quite a bit. Psychiatry, a little less so. Research, some trending there. Medical education is a pretty strong community. And that was just 8:30 this morning, right? So go ahead. Yeah.
Does that include, if those hashtags were included in retweets?
Yes, it includes any time it would be included. Yes. So those are those pieces. So the question was, is for those people on Zoom, does that include those retweets? And the answer is yes. So basically, if you're passionate about any of those things, it's just a way to amplify your message and to find like-minded people internationally, which is interesting. The other thing is that how many of you guys here hold a leadership role? Raise your hand if you have some leadership role formally. Okay, well, the rest of you are leaders in other ways. But one of the great roles of leadership, and I spent 5 years leading our faculty development for our campus prior to taking on this interim chair role, but is recognizing good achievement among people that report to you or work with you, right? And you can't really thank people enough for the great work, So, and if you're not on social media, think about that as one great way to amplify your mentees, your junior colleagues, your budding scientists in your lab for the great things they've done. Maybe it's a really important contribution to a paper that you worked on together. Whatever it is, we're starting a new residency program, so this is a way for me to thank the people that were the primary workers on that. But, it can be anything, and you can't do enough of it. And then the nice thing is, because I know that Becky does a newsletter for you guys too, then it's archived, right? You can go find it again when you need to pull that photo for your annual report or for whatever it might be, your website for the residency, those kind of things. So the other thing is that Twitter is a very flat medium. We are all in this room, so we're more or less active on the media. But you can see that who is got a lot of followers and who are, which is not, by the way, what you should aim for, but, celebrities, politicians, people in office have a lot of followers, right? So, but it's an interesting way to directly engage with them. So how long would it take, if we were to try to make a formal appointment through an administrative assistant to meet with them to give our 2 cents in, right? And would they actually read it? We don't know. And some people don't manage their own Twitter accounts, so that's always, a question. But this is just this week. So the Surgeon General, U.S. Surgeon General, posted his thoughts on some of the big priorities he has for public health for the country. So decreasing opioid overdoses, good cause. Decreasing vaping, right? Youth e-cigarette use, which is an epidemic. Increasing oral health, which we see actually a lot of applications in the Robert Wood Johnson program for oral health. It's a big health disparity. And then, increasing awareness of the link between national security and health. So these are his areas. But, looking at that, what is missing? So there's a lot of things missing that we care about, right? So I thought, well, I'm going to respond to that. But I think, those are good causes. But my response was, but what about suicide, the rising suicide rates, particularly among youth and vulnerable populations? What about that, And so I think this is yesterday after I got in. And, and he responded, And so it's an interesting way to engage directly with some of these thought leaders. And he had his own take, So his take ties back to the security piece, but of course the veteran suicide rate, right? So been a major epidemic for many years. And so, and it doesn't matter who it is. When you go to APA, you go to any big conference, and you see a plenary or a keynote, many of them are on, and it's your way to continue that dialogue. Sometimes you get a chance to really hear their thoughts, or find that link that they mentioned in their keynote, whatever it might be. So whenever you travel, and many of you go to conferences several times a year, it's kind of sort of consuming it at a more interactive level. So the other piece is, so you remember the NIMH was our big leader. So, but look how many followers Demi Lovato has. 56.9 million followers, right? So, and Kevin Love and Michael Phelps have quite a few followers as well. And they're athletes if you don't know who they are. But so always keep in mind that we as scientists and psychiatrists and psychologists and clinicians, we're the small people on Twitter. Still it's the celebrities that dominate. And so when we want to really make a difference in advocacy and public health, it does help to partner with some of these folks. However, there's interesting pieces as well, just about what changes people's stigma, right? There's some research on that. And as it turns out, knowing somebody as a non-stereotype is more effective than having a celebrity say, I had anxiety, right? And so if you have a colleague that has anxiety, that's part of your UW faculty and tweets out there, when I had my first panic attack when I was 13, even though I'm the, ex-leadership role now here, that's a powerful statement. And I guarantee you that a lot of people will read that, like it, retweet it, and then take it home with them to say, what, I thought I was alone in my panic attacks, but now I know that faculty X or leader Y, also does that. This was famously done by a sitting president of, I think his University of Cincinnati, who tweeted out about his teenage suicide attempts. And this is not when he was past president, it's when he was the current president in Cincinnati. And that was a gutsy thing to do. And it lit up the Twitter universe, and people took notice of that because, it's something authentic that people are putting out there. So anyways, so just to keep in mind that we all have this potential role on stigma reduction. And the other side of the pendulum is that, guess what? There's a lot of bad misinformation out there being deliberately put out there. And if we're not on, no one's going to respond to it, right? So there's a real kind of role for kind of being a voice for public health. So I won't spend a lot of time on this too, but Meg Chisholm at Hopkins is an expert on Altmetrics, and there's also good data, or at least emerging data, that citations can increase as social media engagement increases. And so you'll see a lot of journals that will put out a free article now, right? That you can read, and they hope that you'll subscribe to the journal, and then B, read more and write and publish in that journal. So when I gave this presentation to the chairs group, I had Anne from academic psychiatry talk about her perspective as the lead on the academic psych account, and so she tries to highlight key articles, but then also just try to be somewhat professional because she's representing the journal and as that role, but it's a great way to amplify the number of folks that might see a key publication that you were a part of, or maybe your mentee did, or just someone you admire or you think is really good for the field. So these are kind of my rules of thumb. And by the way, this is an elevator from Seattle Children's, which I thought I liked their logo. But so if you want to rise to become a whale, on social media instead of a small fish, then here's a few tips. So one is so there is a temptation to be a self-promoter, right? So I won't ask you to raise your hands, but probably most of you know someone who is a shameless self-promoter, right? So they're not rare in academia. So so my advice is that, is it fun to see 20 tweets that are self-aggrandizing tweets in a row? No. And in fact, you can mute or block people, right? So mute just means that they don't, show up. Block is that they don't see you, you don't see them, that kind of thing. They're ships in the night. So my general advice, if you're not on it, is to follow a 20 to 1, 20 helping others out to one thing maybe about yourself or about your thing, so that you're not just a shameless kind of self-marketer. So the second thing is that, and I won't spend a lot of time in this talk, but there's been a ton of stuff written about social media and ethics, right? And professionalism, a ton of stuff. And Sandra DeYoung has done a lot of this work, and there's many others. But my rule of thumb is that what I call the 3 Ps. So if you are okay and assume that 3 Ps will be reading anything you've ever tweeted or put out, then you're okay to put it out there. So 3 Ps are your patience, because I have patience, and I was surprised when it first happened, that are following me. And now I'm mindful, like, of everything I put out there. Would I be comfortable if in my next session, my patient, I saw that thing that you wrote, and here's my thought on it. So that's one thing. And of course, an easy way to get fired is to violate HIPAA, which we all know. The second thing is your partners, your colleagues. Is what you're putting out there accurate? Is it something that you feel like your partners here, part of this department, your partners in your specialty, say you are a reproductive psychiatrist, and that community, is that something you're comfortable with? And the third thing is your PR professional. And so you have both Becky, here in your department, who is your lead, but she also reports up through the UW overall PR apparatus, which is very similar to how I work in a state school as well. And so, the question is, if your post was pulled out of context, right, would it be okay and pass all 3 of those measures? And I think the answer is yes, you're pretty safe. And then there are people that, some of my mentors, Gene Beresin at Mass General, he now runs Clay Center for Media along with Ellen Broughton. And, so if he's going to put out something that could be a little contentious, he will first check on it with the PR lead for Mass General before he puts it out there through the Clay Center. So, so you just want to do your due diligence. And I know people put, this is my personal account, but in the end, you will be held to it if you're deemed unprofessional. And it's been proved time and again, whether it's a pseudonym, whatever. So, and then it goes back to 3 keywords. Be consistent. So if you tweet about 16 things, you're really tweeting about nothing, right? Because it's all the random grab bag, and no one really knows what you're about, right? But 3 things, are important. So is it mental health, addiction, and leadership? Is it equity? Is it whatever it is that you're most passionate about? Culture of health is the Robert Wood Johnson one. Whatever it is that you really believe in, be consistent in that message, and then people will find you because they'll see you on your hashtags, and also in the chats as you get more. But the thing is that everyone starts with 0 followers, and don't be ashamed of that. And, and don't worry about that, and just be authentic, do your thing. And then, whether you get, 50 followers or 5,000, it just takes time, but I wouldn't worry about that piece of it. I follow a lot of people who don't have a ton of followers, but they say really profound things that stretch my thinking. And some of them are chairs, and some of them are everyday people, and some are consumers, and some are family members, some are suicide survivors. It's all sorts of folks, and they're all online. So those are my general rules of thumb. So for sake of time, let's do a bit of a thought exercise, and you can either go back to your person you talked to earlier, or find a new friend in this room or on Zoom. So imagine now that you have just, been so charged up by this amazing presentation on social media today that, as you're gazing ahead in your career timeline, you are in fact presenting a poster at the APA conference, right? Right, Michelle? So now what, how do you make sure that you go and you don't just ghost the conference and then no one knows you're ever there and you go home, which is what many of us do at conferences, right? Let's be honest. But how do you make sure that you use social media to get noticed? That's the question. So why don't you turn to your friend or colleague and talk for a couple minutes, and I'll be interested in a couple of insights. So go ahead.
Nobody was presenting videos. I didn't want to interrupt you. But
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll take one more minute and then I'll have a couple volunteers talk about what you would do.
yeah, that's how you know you can go. You want to do the technology.
Okay, could I have one volunteer, one or two volunteers? Any thoughts that you guys would use to amplify your message? And sorry for those on Zoom that it's probably hard for you to participate in this exercise, but let me ask, anyone want to volunteer your strategy for using social media? Yes, go ahead, and please say your name too. Uh-huh.
And I would get one of those little postage stamp things.
Uh-huh.
And put it on my poster.
Okay.
And then people walk by and too busy to stop.
Yes.
They would hold their phone up and they would link to my YouTube channel.
Very nice.
I present my book.
Yes. So one suggestion from Paul here was that for those who are on Zoom, is that he would put one of those markers on his poster where you can scan it, and then be taken to his YouTube site. Do you actually have a YouTube site? Oh, that's great. So and that would then drive them towards learning more about the lab and about science and that piece of it. So that's fantastic. That's a great suggestion. Any other thoughts on what you would do for your social media strategy? Yes. And say who your name is too. Yeah. Yes. That's great. Yes.
And then doing a retweet of something related to that and actually their poster.
That's fantastic.
And then doing that again closer to the time.
Yes.
The meeting was trying to be cognizant of the 2021 rule work.
Yes. Right.
Retweeting things.
Yes.
On it and then try to get some buzz for it.
That's wonderful. So Jeff, is that right? So Heidi, is channeling Jeff. But for those on Zoom, basically it was to try to identify those from the APA or around the country who are interested in his line of research, to try to tweet or retweet, either something he had posted or one of their tweets, and add a little message prior to the conference, and then during the conference, closer to it, try to send it out again to really to amplify. So I think that's a great strategy. And just parenthetically, if you're not on the media, you can also, without everyone seeing it, direct message a person as well. And so you could send a note saying, going to be at poster section X from this to this time. Admire your work. You put it in their bit.ly link to their latest paper. Love this paper. Can we have coffee? Here's my email address, something like that. So I think that's a great idea. So any other thoughts you guys have? Yes. And then name. Yes.
It's important to,
It's
Aaron.
Aaron.
So are you the Aaron? Okay. Go ahead. Yes. All right. So you're another Aaron, but we care about you too. Go ahead. Yes.
It's important to like hashtag with something about your topic because people will monitor Twitter not only by who they follow but by hashtag. So if you're doing something on suicide, you have hashtag suicide. People, and you also want to have hashtag whatever the hashtag is going to be for this APA meeting.
Yes.
So people are following hashtag what's in this APA meeting or what's in the suicide that they will see.
Yes. So again, for those who are non-Twitter users, hashtag is just the pound sign and then plus the word. And for every annual meeting, pretty much, they usually have the org plus the year as sort of the conference organizer. So it might be APA 18, APA 2018 or something like that. So that's one tag. Plus, so if it's a suicide piece, you're saying you do hashtag suicide and try to link those together. Is that right, Aaron?
Right.
Yes.
So people monitoring hashtags of interest will see your tweet.
Yes. And there may be a life after conferences. So Becky and I were talking about this morning, but many people just emerge during conferences, tweet, and then they go dormant again. And so, but those tweets are out there. And so people may search for them as they newly join, and it may resurrect your poster, which may eventually be a paper, right? And so, and then it may generate more citations and, and rise, and so it's one of those things that's a win-win, on that side. So we're going to move on just for basis of time, but I know you have many more great ideas. So you have this, if you're here, just a handout, but kind of what some of the language is for retweeting and so on. And so I was at the ACAP conference, which is the National Child Psychiatry Conference, and with Chris Farley, and we saw one of your faculty members, Dr. Cowley, and presented her with an award for academic leadership called the Kinker Award. It's one of the highest awards from the Academy. And so I went to that talk, and at that time we did not yet have a UW, psychiatry Twitter handle, but I put it out there. And then it's a nice theme because I could find it again, and so when I was given this grand rounds, which I did not anticipate, and maybe I did by that time, but anyways, I could go find that piece and it's right there, and then I could use it for this grand rounds to entreat us to think about what she actually said, which is super important, which is that for you to actually use this grand rounds, you need to do something like right away, probably within the week. And otherwise it's going to fade away like all the other grand rounds we all attend, and nothing will happen. And then when I come back in 2 years, I'll ask how many people are on Twitter, and it'll be the same number, right? So, we can't have that. So the question, the Cowley challenge is, what are you going to do about it? You as in everyone here, and I'll help you if I can. So will Becky. So if you are a novice user, how many of you guys are not on Twitter at all? Raise your hands. All right, that's great. So you are the bold novice group. Create a Twitter account. Becky can help you right now. Maybe not right now, but right after now. So, and just follow 10 people. So, and know that there's some super users in your community. So Aaron Lyon, the other Aaron, he has 1,200 followers, which means you don't get to 1,000 by accident. that he is on all the time, I suspect, or quite often. Is that right, Becky? Yes, but you know, between his work, right? So in a good way, he is on and probably amplifying the research messages that he's trying to get out there, right, on child health. You know, has anyone heard of Wendy Sue Swanson? So she is a giant on Twitter from Seattle Children's. She has 38,000 followers. You know, so if you are someone that works in child psychiatry, child psychology, schools, resilience, early childhood, any of those things, why don't you try tagging her on your tweet? You know, because if she retweets that, it'll go to 38,000 more eyes than if you have 50 followers, right? You know, those kind of things. So, so that's the principle. But you can just also get a sense from veteran users about how they navigate, you know, the ethics of things, the flow, the frequency, you know, when people argue, what they do about it, you know, those kind of things. So it's kind of good, sort of, you know, sort of a virtual mentorship. All right. How many of you are intermediate users? Raise your hands. You know, you use it some frequency. Okay, yeah. So how many of you guys have been on a Twitter chat? You in the back. You're like the super user, secret one. What was your name again? Jess. All right, Jess. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's great. But so, but if you are an intermediate user, try participating in a chat just to get to learn the ropes. I was talking to Becky about this morning. So there happens to be a weekly medical education chat every Thursday. It's at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And you don't have to be prolific on it, but just get on there and then, you know, look up MedEd chat and then test it out and you'll see the flow. And once you see the flow, then the next week, try posting something on there. All of us know something about medical education just by being in this department, right? So, and your thoughts, you know, and they'll have a different theme each week. But as you can see, there's 6,000 plus educators on that. And it's a good way to get your name out there. Oh, also the schedule, and just be regular, you know, however you're going to do it. So this is the outcome of a chat. This is one I participated in on minority mental health with a few other organizations, but basically you can see impressions are sort of like a proxy of eyeballs, but in a short time generated 41 million kind of views on some of those tweets. And so it's a way to take what you care about and push it out. And the more followers the org has, that's your co-sponsor, the more it kind of gets pushed out in the Twitter universe. So if you are an advanced user, how many of you are advanced users in this room? Maybe you in the back. But so something I recommend is to adopt a couple of novice users, because a way to get them footing is for you to re-amplify what they're saying. You know, push it out there, retweet it, like it, you know, tag them when you're putting something in there. And so I did this last month with our two folks that are going to start a residency program. And they both joined in December, and they're up to 300 plus followers, you know, because they've been pretty active on it. And so, you know, it doesn't take a long time, but it does take some practice, and it helps if you have someone. This is the ultimate generativity versus stagnation, you know, kind of thing, but help them out. And then finally, as a department, and Becky and I talked about this, you know, with the approval of your chair, of course, consider hosting a Twitter chat. And maybe you want to partner with UW Medicine, which has 20,000 followers. Right? Maybe you want to partner with Columbia Psychiatry or not, you know, and, but they have, you know, 13,000 followers. Maybe you want to talk about policy with National Council, and they have 33,000 followers, you know. And so it doesn't matter who it is, but, you know, find those partners. And then within each of the units which you represent, divisions, residency programs, fellowships, subspecialties, find a super user. Find someone that's going to become at least intermediate, you know, that will then help to amplify the good things that are going on. Because I do hear that you, like every other department, need to recruit, right? Faculty, residents, trainees, postdocs, everybody, right? So, so with that, I'll close up and just say that, you know, I know that there is some risk, but, you know, again, with your chair's blessing and Becky's, if you're willing to take it on, there's a great reward because, you know, it really is a way for you to be creative in a different way. It's like custom made for people working in healthcare because you can do these micro statements. If you have 5 seconds, you can just forward on some other article that you read. Get a little more time, you add 3 sentences, but it's not like you're writing a book. And you'll find that as you get into it, it's a way to expand and understand what's happening in multiple circles that you were not previously a part of, no matter how active you were in academics. So I encourage you to think about it. And with that, I will wrap up and take any questions. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
Just a comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Me, who is very not tech savvy, and I now have a Twitter account that I do not have.
That's fantastic. Yes, well done. So thank you very much. And I would add that maybe one tangible thing would be for Becky to help gather all the Twitter accounts that currently are out there. Sounds like you got a half dozen or maybe a dozen, and create a directory, and even consider adding that to your webpage, for your professional profile, if it's a professional Twitter account, so that people can follow you. So that's a great piece. Good. Any other questions, comments? Yes, please.
I wonder, well, I have a personal account that I wouldn't use professionally, but I can make a professional account. And could we have like Aaron Green, UW, or something like that? Or do we have to like have that blessed if we're going to identify ourselves as part of our system or something?
Becky could probably answer that. I can answer from my system. We, for the official handles, they have to come from Central for us, Central PR, which is the highest up PR. And so none of us do that except for a unit, like if the department, has that, but it has to be cleared. And so, but what they ask us to do though, is that if they are going to create one, you've got to use it enough for it to be worth it, because if you create one and it just lies dormant, right? That's the challenge. So, but yeah, go ahead, Becky, what's your thoughts? And I don't know if you want to come up, because some people are, here via Zoom, and maybe you can also speak directly as sort of the torch carrier for the future. Do you want to come up here? So.
I'll just say that as far as I know, the UW Medicine news team does not have any kind of requirements for a Twitter handle for faculty or staff under UW Medicine. As a department, we haven't gotten that far to think through it. So it's something that we can start thinking about. And the UW Medicine does have Twitter guidelines and social media guidelines, but the specific Twitter handle is not one of them.
What about just identifying on your bio is that you work at Harborview or in UW Medicine? Is that appropriate or inappropriate?
I think that's appropriate. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Good point. Yes. Go ahead.
Sort of question.
Yes.
In this age where we're concerned about, the business model for Twitters or Facebooks and also what they're doing with this information, especially I guess with regard to patients who might follow us, what kind of a trail is this going to lead?
Yeah.
Are we opening our patients or our colleagues up to targeted advertising or getting
So it's a good question. How much can we trust the corporate entity not to sell our information? Is that kind of thing, or misuse it? And the answer is, one can never know for sure. I think Jack had to testify in front of Congress this year as well for Twitter, along with our friends at Facebook. So, and so that is why, frankly, I advise you to use it purely as a professional platform. And if you go back to those 3 Ps I talked about earlier, if you are only using it and you're okay with those groups seeing it, I think you're all right, because even if someday you run for governor of Washington or whatever it is, that it's all right, because it would be the same kind of thing you would for Channel 7 or Channel 3, and they ask you to come and talk about, your research area. It'd be the same. Those clips live out there as well, right? So, yes.
say if some of the families that I work with decide to follow this,
Yes.
somehow
It's an interesting question. The question was, what about the families that follow, right? And, there's actually a very powerful mental health consumer community on Twitter. It far outnumbers the number of providers on. And so it's actually quite empowering for many of them to kind of link up. And so, I've not encountered where they felt outed, so to speak, as a consumer. And of course, I never encourage them to say, what their things are. But I do see a lot of self-disclosure on all social media platforms. And I think just, my rule of thumb would be if they were an active patient of mine and I worried about them, I might counsel them in the clinic. But in the end, I guess they're also, they have to make their own decisions. And so, but it's a great question about autonomy and judgment. So I think that's a great question. Yes.
Not using Twitter, I don't think.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
What if you tweet and you have a patient that is angry at you, or happens to
Yes.
what we're doing here at UW is terrible?
Yes.
Or it's being always very negative.
Yes. So what happens if you see all this negative stuff when you get on? Well, you have several choices. You can, if it's really vitriolic, you can block them. Of course, they can open another account and follow, but that kind of thing. But blocking them is supposed to make your tweets not visible to them, and then vice versa. So that's sort of the most extreme thing you can do. You can also report them to Twitter, which can sort of take away their access to their account if it's particularly egregious. You can also mute them, so which is less, severe than blocking, where it's just it doesn't pop up in your timeline and so on. So that's a less extreme piece. Yeah. They don't know that you muted them. No. So now the third thing you can do is engage with them, which is interesting and tricky. So we see that a lot in the vaccine community. So there's a lot about vaccines, right? So and sometimes science doesn't win those arguments, right? So at a certain point, usually beyond a single reply, I just cut my losses, because you're probably not going to convince certain folks about science and these pieces. So so I would say just use your judgment. And then there's been very proactive professional societies. So I don't know if you've been following American Academy of Pediatrics. Been very, very proactive during a lot of discussion about immigration and some of those pieces. And then you would have to decide, as if you were a member of AAP, or if you worked in child health or those kind of things, probably in conversation with your PR lead here and your chair and so on. How engaged do you want to be? It's always an interesting line between free speech, right, and academic professionalism. And that's the piece you have to navigate. But I think if you just keep in mind, there's an illusion sometimes, because Twitter moves very quickly, that once you put it out there, it's gone, but it's there, right? And so that's what we've seen with Supreme Court justices. We've seen it, in all sorts of cases. And so just always, if you're worried about it, pause. If you're really worried about it, talk to your PR lead. And if she's really worried about it, she'll probably talk to central PR, to say, before you put something out there, that this is what it is. So, but, it's just one of those things. You can always just say this is a personal account, but ultimately you will be held, to that standard. But that being said, there are thousands, of physicians, psychologists, people on Twitter, all over the world right now. There's probably tens of thousands, maybe more. And so people are navigating it, because it sounds scary if you're not on it. They're navigating it as long as you are positive, for the most part. I try not to be snarky. I think that a lot of people are snarky on Twitter, but I think that can bite you a little bit, because humor can sometimes be perceived the wrong way. But if you, for example, the safest thing you could do right now would be, and we were chatting about this earlier, maybe you just want to, promote tweets when there's a news story about the department. You're just going to push it out there. I'm proud of Dr. X or Dr. Y for receiving this award, or for this publication. No one's ever going to call you out on that, So, then you go a little bit further, and then the fine lines are eventually when you become a national leader on Twitter, and then other national leaders on Twitter start tagging you because they work in organizations where they're totally free to say whatever they want, and then you have to kind of navigate that piece. But so you have to fine lines, and then depending on what office you have, locally, nationally as well, it can define what you can and can't say, right? So, but I think what you're asking are the right questions. Yes, Becky, go ahead.
People will put on their profile that these opinions are my own. Right. So even if you have your job affiliation on there, just make sure that that's separated and that people understand and not representing the institution that's in mind.
Yeah. But it may not protect you if you're out there. so just keep that in mind. So I think we're past time, and we probably have to wrap up, Dutch Nun. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.